Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sales Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Daniel McComber. With me today is Brad Jensen. He's the owner of Key Nutrition. Good to have you here, Brad.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got connected through, Jimmy Rex. You guys have been like really good friends for a long time.
Yeah.
And I guess you've also been his coach for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Is that something you like to own up to, or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. No, I like working with Jimmy. He just, Jimmy just travels a lot. And the reality is that if he didn't have some form of accountability, he'd probably be 250 pounds because, man, that guy's schedule is just all over. So,
no, I mean, even me, like traveling up here, I just flew in this morning at 5 a.m.
Oof.
And so I'm like, all right, cool. I'm running off of a cup of coffee and some like little oats thing I found at the airport. So,
there you go.
We'll see how my energy does today. Whenever I'm talking with someone like a bodybuilder, fitness, nutrition, I always like put a lot more thought into what I've been eating that day.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Like, when was the last time I worked out? Man. Well, I'm just super excited to have you on because your story is super well known. Your past, and things that you've done, and then even more recently, the amazing company that you've created and started. And so what I was kind of hoping today is we could dive into your story a little bit, but through kind of a slightly different lens where we could talk more about, the different things you had to do to, survive and make money. And also like how that ultimately, like the lessons you learned growing up in the environment that you did and going through the things you did, how that ultimately led you to start Key Nutrition and how that ultimately helped you become the entrepreneur you are today.
Yeah, man. I've shared this a lot and I'm totally cool with that, because the reality is that I'm 11, my sobriety date is November 20th of 2012. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And because, up until that point, my life was full of drugs and crime and dealing and addiction. And it was not pretty, and it started at a pretty young age. I was overweight as a kid. It really like 11 to 13 age where like you haven't hit puberty yet, you haven't hit the growth spurt, but I definitely was I was an overweight little kid.
Yes. I
wish I could go back and just give that kid a hug because I mean, he was like, dude, you haven't hit puberty yet. You haven't hit your growth spurt. You hang around, your buddies, they flex their muscles, but they're really rib cages. Like they were just like ectomorphs, right?
That looks like abs, but it's really just the skinny abs, right?
Yeah. It's funny. You were saying like you were teased for being too skinny. And so I was like, you can't win with these kids.
You can either be a little bit overweight or super underweight. You're going to get teased no matter what. One thing I like that you said earlier is that you're teased by like your friends too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's honestly the worst. I mean, it's middle school, right? So like, are they really your friends?
Right.
They're just the people that you kind of associate with. And that was the same thing. Like the most, I guess, kind of verbal abuse I got from my quote unquote friends. And so that's what made it a little bit tough.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what's worse, getting shoved in lockers by some bully or having your friends constantly make you the butt end of the joke. But either way, it sucked ass. That's all I know. So I found drinking first when I was 13. And, I came from a good Mormon family. I was the youngest of 5. Like, yeah, I knew it was wrong. I knew that, and I think any 13-year-old knows they're not doing something right. But I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then the bottle came around to me and I took a swig and, classic peer pressure. And I remember thinking, why in the hell would adults do this? It was awful.
Mm-hmm.
About 20 minutes later, I'm like, this shit makes perfect sense. This is why they do it. It felt really good. And so I drank, but I found fitness shortly after, probably about, I was like 14 or 15 years old. And dude, I just fell in love. I was enthralled. I started following all the magazines, the diets in there. I mean, it was the strictest shit ever, and I was doing it. And then I turned 16 and I got a gym pass and just fell in love, dude. I transformed my body. By the time I was a junior in high school, like the hottest girl in school thought I was a new guy. Like she was like, oh my, like and this girl came up to me, my friend thinks you're hot. I'm like, yeah, I had a crush on her all sophomore year. Like I'm not new.
Yeah.
I just had gained like 30 pounds. Like,
oh, wow.
Like the muscle. Yeah. Hit puberty and was just so into it, man. So into lifting. And,
well, out of curiosity, just because from the other stories that I've heard you tell, it's almost like the kind of, I guess, addictive personality almost was starting that young. Because, I mean, you could be addicted to anything, right? And so like a lot of times people say that they're addicted to like fitness.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that you were like that much into it? Or?
Oh, dude, 100%. So at first, I mean, it wasn't just like I got chubby because, you know, I hadn't hit a puberty. That was part of it. But I loved macaroni and cheese with hot dogs cut up in it. I loved pastries. I loved cheese danishes. Like I ate to the point where like I see my kid, he's only 4, sometimes eating like that. And I'm like, dude, we're going to stop. I'm not going to let my parents did, you know? And so
the scars of your past are like, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah, it was my kid. Man, that's how I was all growing up. And then I found fitness and I was 100% addicted, dude. I mean, I was so like, and you know, I guess one could argue whether they're good addictions or they're bad. I don't know if there's such thing as a good addiction. I think there's healthier addictions, but I think if you take it to an addictive state, it's, you know, but I don't know. Like one could argue too that the most successful people in the world are super addicted to business,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
So whether you want to call it extreme, you know, dedication, obsession, or addiction, it was something.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I was jacked and I'd kind of like, you know, felt like I was the man, yet I still like, I was like, I want to party, but I'd stopped drinking because I was so into fitness.
Yeah.
And so I tried pain pills when I was 17 at a party, and, you know, the rest is history. I fell in love. Like, you know, I remember that moment vividly.
Well, it's crazy. I remember when you told that story on a different podcast. I mean, unfortunately, Utah, pain pills is like the gateway to most kids. Mm-hmm. You said you're from Utah. Which part of Utah was it?
I grew up in Murray, Utah.
Murray? Okay, cool. So I grew up in Cedar Hills pretty much.
Okay.
Moved there when I was from San Diego. Moved there when I was like 10 years old or something like that. And yeah, I went to Lone Peak High School, which is I don't know what the statistics are now, but it was the #1 abuser of pain pills. I was going there.
Yeah.
In the state. And unfortunately, it was also the #1 school for suicides. And so like that was an unfortunate thing. So I could just relate to your story a little bit because, yeah, a lot of the parties and things that we went to were up in like the Alpine Hills, these mansions where, of course, I hate to say it, but that's where a lot of the pills are, like the pill cabinets and things like that. It's just, frankly, every other house had some kind of like Percocet or pill in them. And so a lot of those kids had access to it. And so I remember seeing that and even partaking a little bit in that when I was going through high school too, just because it was so pretty easily accessible. Now, I mean, that was in 2012 and 2013. I guess, was it pretty difficult for you to access that kind of stuff after you first tried it?
I think it was way worse because this is 2002 at this point, and this is still when the pill mills, like this was, I mean, I don't know if you remember those. I mean, you were 10 years younger than me, but it was, I mean, they had not regulated Oxycontin.
That's
like,
right.
I mean, it was, you could get Oxycontin 40s and 80s, like, I mean, easy. It was, and so there was these pill mills all over and, you know, a lot in like, you know, California and Florida and there were some here, but people were just prescribing. They didn't really know yet the ramifications. I think they did, but they just didn't care. We didn't know. Like society was just kind of like, oh, like this. And so it was really prevalent, really easy to get. And so I started going down to Mexico, and this part is relevant because this is where my entrepreneurship began. Is I remember some guy told me, hey, but you can also go to Mexico and you can go to the pharmacias. And this is back when, like, you could still do that today. They're just a horrible deal. The Mexicans caught on to start charging, but it was cheap back then. Mm-hmm. So I drove through, and I was scared shitless the first time. And I went and I took off my door panels and my Pontiac Sunfire, and you took them off, and then you stuff everything in there. You load it up, you tape it up, you put it in there, drill them back on, put on a sombrero, and drive through the border. And I was scared the first time, but I had no idea. It was like idiot Saban. I had no idea the amount of federal felonies I was committing. I was just like, oh, cool. Like, cool. Oh, hopefully I don't get caught. And I was scared, but I made it. And so I was like, oh. So I get back to town and, you know, and it's like a 14-hour drive. Like I was committed. Like this was not like that.
It wasn't Tijuana then, because Tijuana is that's like 18 hours, isn't it?
No, it's about 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was Tijuana.
So it was Tijuana. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe it was even 15. I'm trying to remember. It was so long ago, but
good drive though.
Yeah, we did it in one day.
Oh, no kidding.
We rotate, and me and my buddy, and
so he kind of showed you like what to do, and like because he had done it before.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. He had done it once before with these older guys. And I was like, screw them. Let's cut them out of the loop because they wanted us to go down for them. And I was like, let's just go down.
Yeah.
And so we got back and I did that, I think 3 other times. So I did it 4 times total. And that's kind of where any entrepreneurship began, and like a joke about it, but it's serious because I started selling these to kids in high school and, you know, all of a sudden, so I'm jacked. I'm making more money than most high schoolers. I've got a briefcase full of cash. The other briefcase is full of shit. And I had a ledger book of like who owed me money. And I'm selling these to kids in places like Cedar Hills and Conwood Heights and these Draper and these. So I'm selling them to these kids who had disposable income because their parents did, and they're buying them. I didn't really so I'm not like selling these to junkies that are pounding on my windows at 8 a.m. in the morning needing their fix. Like these were kids doing them on weekends. But during that time I started using them daily because I had them. Right. And still graduated. Like this is how good I was. My parents knew I partied, but they just figured I drank a little. Like they'd kind of given up on the church thing with me, and they were just like, I got just good enough grades, like a 2.5 GPA maybe, to just like, okay, like he doesn't like school, but like I made sure I was like, I love doing this. And if I start showing any signs, and so I was very like methodical about how I used, but I started using it every day. And on the weekends I'd use more and I'd get really messed up. And, but you know, the day came that, you know, I ran out of those. Some kid got stuck down there in a Mexican prison, and I was like, I'm done with this. Yeah. And I remember thinking that moment, dude, I was like, I just got my personal training certification because my parents told me, well, you need to go to college. And I remember looking at a point blank, and I said, why the hell would I go to college? I literally hate school. Like I hate school.
2.5.
Yeah. Like, and that was cheating. I was like, I hate it. Why would I want to keep going for 4 years? I understand, and no offense to anyone who, I mean, this is a sales entrepreneurship podcast. So
most guys will understand.
I just, you know, if you want to be a doctor, go to school. Yeah. I think school is one of the biggest arbitrages out there, dude. It is the only debt that even if you claim bankruptcy will never leave. It's people get out of, if your parents want to pay for you, cool. I don't think it's the nicest thing to do to them. And nowadays people don't even give a shit. Like,
no, they really don't. I mean, it's funny because I was committed to going to the school thing and everything. And I did learn quite a bit at school. But since I graduated in entrepreneurial management, which is like, wait, what? And it's because as I was going, I was going to do like global supply chain management. I'm like, it was just a backup because I was killing it in sales. I had a couple other projects. So I'm like, why would I get a degree for a backup that I have no intention of ever using? Right. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So I switched to entrepreneurial management. I'm like, well, at least I can learn some things that are actually going to apply since I was already so committed to this degree. Since I got my degree, I've literally learned, I'm like, listen, the best thing that someone could do if they want a wealth of knowledge more than you can get from school and better than like YouTube is if you can get to the point where you make a good amount of money, let's say you have like $50,000 or something like that saved up, or even $20,000 saved up. And then you can go to the people who do smart investments, who do real estate, who do all these things and know how to turn some money into more money.
Yes.
And they'll give you all the education and the time if you're actually actively willing to invest with them.
Yes.
And that's what I've noticed. I'm like, all I got to do is just keep making money to the point where I have enough to invest, and then go find people to invest with and just ask them a billion questions about it.
Dude, yeah. Yeah. And again, like there were some perks about school. I think that, you know, like the whole college experience would have been cool. I mean, but I was already addicted to drugs. I was just like, I'm not one to go to this. And I don't think it's inherently bad, but I think people just go. And I remember even at that time, and that wasn't as kosher to say, I remember thinking, but why go to school? And they're like, well, you'll figure out what you want to do. And I'm like, no, I want to do fitness. And they're like, that's not a career. Like they were like, you're, okay. So I got certified as a personal trainer before I finished high school because they were like pushing me, like they wanted me to go to the community college. And I'm like, I'm not going to go to the community college. I'm like, listen, I'll get a certification. And I remember thinking they were like, oh, it's a cute little job. Okay. But you need to find a real job one day. Well, they know that fitness can be a real job, but so I got hired at a place called Bally Total Fitness, and that shit was still stuck in the 80s in 2003. But I was the youngest personal trainer they'd ever hired at that location. At least I was 18, but I looked the part. I was, had some charisma, and I remember thinking, I need to just, it's time to grow up. Like, I've been using this shit for like 8 months straight. And, you know, it's time for me to make some real money.
Yeah.
Not just, you know, like, not just a bunch of cash in a briefcase. And so, I'd heard about these things called withdrawals, but I'd never experienced them because I had never stopped long. I'd never stopped.
Yeah.
And I thought I would just feel a little sick. And the day came and I was so sick. And just to give anybody any context, it's opiates is when it's like the worst flu you've ever had times 10. But the kicker is like this borderline panic attack at all times. You feel so anxious. You like, if it was just physically, I could have done it, but it was the almost panic attack at all times. Like it's this, you like can't catch your breath. You're so anxious. And then on top of that, you're so sick. When I got COVID pretty bad, like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and it actually kind of took me back. I remember thinking like, oh, this is kind of similar, but it was just the physical. And so I could get through it. It wasn't this like emotional, just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I made the decision, that I was not going to feel that sick, and called a friend, and he basically said, my brother's got some for you. I came over, and you know, that something he had for me was not, I'd only used pills at that point. And I think for every addict, there's these lines in the sand we draw that we're not going to cross. And it's a big series of just crossing these before you get to a place where you're like, I'm done crossing every line. And shooting up heroin was definitely something I had heard people doing. I was like, ew, that's for like junkies downtown. Like,
Like a lot of steps. I mean, you usually go like pills and then maybe a couple other things, and then heroin is way down the line. So going from pills to heroin is like kind of a big leap.
It was just like what he had. And I remember I shot it up, and I said no at first, and it took me all of about 2 minutes where I like called him back in the room, and I'm like, dude, I can't do this. Like, and so I shot up heroin, and, you know, my life really was never the same. I remember thinking that moment, he said, I'm sorry, kid, your life's never going to be the same. He patted me on the back. And I remember thinking, like, well, no, dude, I'm not going to keep doing this. Certainly. Keep in mind, I had no plan how I was not going to do it.
Right.
And so heroin is significantly cheaper. And now you have fentanyl, which thank God wasn't around when I was using, because that's killing people right and left. And allegedly you can't even find heroin anymore. It's just fentanyl. And fentanyl is even cheaper than heroin. And so there's this like, so I started using more, and dude, it just took me down pretty quick. And so for the next 10 years, from 18 to 28, was just spent in this incomprehensible, like, demoralization of self. Like, I can't even describe it. It was just, when I think back and I tell that story, it's almost like I'm telling it about a different person. I mean, I went to jail, just to sum it up, I went to jail 17 different times. I ended up, you know, giving over about 18 months of my life away at different times, 4 months here, 3 months here, and then finally did a year at the very end. And that's not even when I got sober, but that led me into the worst year of my life. But, you know, I went to 6 or 7 different treatment centers. I went in and out of AA meetings. Like, I was just the guy that, like, and I would have these brief moments of sobriety. And during that, I'd get back into the fitness industry. Yeah. That's actually where Jimmy gave me a chance. I was sober, and I'd hit him up and was like, dude, I'm personal training again. I'm renting this studio. And he was like, dude, I'll support you. I need to get in shape. He goes, I'll come buy some sessions. And so he did, and he paid me up front for like 20. And, I got high about session 4 and never showed up. I relapsed and took his money. So when I got sober, one of the first things I did was, you know, as you go through these 12 steps in 12-step rooms, one of them is you make amends to people. And so when I got to that step, I hit Jimmy up. I took him to lunch, and I just said, listen, dude, I'm just getting my life together. I don't have the money to pay you, but I can get it. And he was like, I'm like, I need to make this right. And he was like, dude, just train me. So I trained him for like the next, I don't know, 6 or 9 months for free to make up for it. Nice. Maybe it was 6, but, and so that's how me and Jimmy reconnected. And that was really early on in my sobriety. And I'm really grateful. Jimmy's one of the few people in my life outside of my family that, I mean, he came and he bailed me out of jail at different times. He came and picked me up from a Motel 6 when I was, you know, high out of my mind and had just gotten beaten up and jumped. And like, he saw me at my worst, and then now he gets to see me at my best, which is really gratifying. And so that 10 years, man, you know, people ask me a lot, because dude, I mean, I was I lived out of my car at different times. Like, and again, there was moments where I'd pull it together. I'd get jacked again. I'd get sober, start in the fitness industry again. And I would build the shit back pretty quick.
Yeah.
I was really resourceful. I used that same kind of grind. And then, man, I would go like 3 months, 4 months, 6 months once, I think was all. Sometimes it was only 30 days. And then I would just make that decision to just do it one more time. And it was never one more time. Right. And then it would go for another bender and I would completely destroy my life, destroy my reputation. And then something would intervene. The cops started to intervene a lot once I started to get in trouble. My parents would intervene and put me into a detox or a treatment center. And finally, this last year of my using, my parents were done. They were just finally like, hey, like they had gone to like some family counseling with this like addiction specialist. And they were like, you're going to kill him. Like the more you keep enabling him. This is 9 years into a gnarly heroin and meth and cocaine addiction.
Yeah.
And so they cut me off and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, and it's funny when people hit me up and they ask me for advice, first off, there's too much nuance to this. And I just said, listen, if it gets to a place where you feel like you're trying harder to get your loved one sober than they are, and it's causing damage in your life, you got to step away.
Right.
My parents have been married 50 years now. They almost got a divorce on me, almost filed papers because my mom was enabling someone. My dad was so frustrated with her. Like it was bad. And so they cut me off and they said, we love you, but until you're sober, like you can't come around here. If you do, we'll call the cops. Cause I'd stolen from them. I'd stole Christmas presents, you name it. And that was the greatest thing that happened to me because that's where I found my bottom that year is I was homeless the whole entire year. And honestly, again, a resourceful entrepreneur. I only willingly slept on the streets one time. And it's because I was so paranoid because I had started using meth that I was in a hotel room and I got spooked that there was FBI agents under the bed. So I went and laid in the bushes behind the hotel.
Oh, wow.
But outside of that, I always found a place to land, whether it was a really shitty hotel, motel, some trap house in West Valley, like not good places, but I always found a spot.
Yeah.
And
well, a little more about that too, before we kind of wrap up that story. I mean, at the beginning, before you, I guess maybe had gotten in trouble with the law a couple times and so forth, like before the law kind of came into it, but you were still like, getting addicted and strung out. I mean, this is an expensive, I know it's like relatively cheap. Sounds like at the rate that you were doing it, it's pretty expensive to fund a drug habit. And so were you also like selling drugs to get money to do drugs or how are you even funding any of this?
So I just added it up. I used about $150 a day habit. So it was about $100 on heroin every day. And honestly, man, like I needed at least 60 just to like 60 bucks worth to like be normal. Yeah. Which was crazy. And then about $50 a day on methamphetamine, which, that was an interesting, it was a very calculated business decision. I was like, I cannot stay awake because heroin makes you just all,
yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to start doing some meth so I have more energy to go hustle to get my money. But then I got so crazy, dude. I literally was a decision. It was like a calculate. I was like, well, I'm going to start using a little meth because meth will last me like all day and 20 or 40 bucks will get me energy. And the problem is I just underestimated how powerful it would be because it brought out some demons, but $4,600 a day.
Dang.
I'm sorry, a month.
Yeah.
A month. And which, okay. But then you add into that I was, finding, $50 a night to stay at hotel rooms and
yeah.
And I mean, I'm probably looking at 7,000. And then I had to eat some points, like not much, but I would eat. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking it's like 80 grand a year and I didn't have a job. And so, yes, there was a lot of criminal activity. And I wasn't a good enough dealer because I was so there's a golden rule. You never buy from the guys who were also addicts because they were I would get fronted stuff and then I would use it all and then I'd almost get beat up. And so there was a lot of criminal activity in there, but I was also really resourceful. Like I was middlemaning a bunch of stuff. And I was running all over town and, and there was a lot of criminal things I was doing.
But it just turned into your entire life, right? Was funding the drugs and stuff like that. So
every day,
like your brain was almost like fight or flight. Like, okay, if I want to keep doing this, I have to find money. And so then that becomes the point of the day,
dude.
Right?
you wake up, and it's very rarely towards the end did I wake up and actually I would maybe have a little bit of dope to give me what's called so I wasn't in withdrawals, because once you're sick, it's really hard to go run around town and pull whatever schemes you got to do, because it is so vicious. Like, you can barely move. But oftentimes I would wake up and I said, I got about an hour and a half before I am shaking and shivering and sick. So I would immediately just get up, and it was on the grind. I used that same kind of tenacity in entrepreneurship when I began, because I didn't know jack shit. The only shit I knew about business was watching Shark Tank and listening to Gary Vee. That's it. Like, I had no formal business experience. And I remember thinking, all right, like, if I could use half of that tenacity to build my business that I did to, fund my drug habit, like, I'm going to be good.
Yeah.
And so that year ended. I ended up, by the grace of God, I got sober, and it was one of those God shot moments. I'd started praying for the first time in years.
Yeah.
And was like, dude, I don't know if you know who I am, bro, but I'd start getting to the place where I was running around with some really, really bad people, and people wanted for murder. Like, it was like, and I started getting really paranoid from the meth, and I couldn't differentiate. I could tell I was going into some like weird psychosis. I couldn't differentiate true from false. I didn't know if these guys were really after me, if they weren't. I still don't know to this day, but I think they were.
Yeah.
And I started to get scared, and I thought, you know what? If the dope doesn't kill you, dude, the people are. Like, you have got yourself in some messes, and like, you need to get sober. And so, by the grace of God, I got sober. And it was it's kind of this God shot moment, and God intervened that night. It was a whole story about me driving up to my grandpa's funeral in the back of the car. I've told that a lot, but I basically made my mom take me to get dope, and because I wanted to go to my grandpa's funeral, and I was too sick, and so I ended up shooting up dope in her back seat. And my mother watched me do this, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. And I had this moment of clarity where I was like, okay, you have two choices right now, dude. Like, after I did it, I was she's just crying in the front seat, just so heartbroken. And I thought, you have two choices. You can get and stay sober, or you can kill yourself. There is no other way I'm going on a day like this. And the second option seemed far more realistic, because when you've tried 49 times to get sober, there's very little faith that the 50th is going to work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so that night I was arrested in a stolen car that I didn't know was stolen. And the guy asked me to drive, barely knew the guy. And it was just this divine intervention.
Yeah.
Cop pulled me over, and because I was thinking, how do I kill myself tomorrow? Because I can't do this. And he took me to jail, and I was so grateful to go to jail. And so I got out, and
how long were you in jail for that time?
Just 30 days.
Okay, so
the charges were dropped.
Enough.
But it was enough to just sober me up.
Sober you up.
Yeah, like, I went in, and I was so sick. I said things like, I'm going to kill myself, which is what you don't do when you go to jail, because then they put you in a padded psycho room upstairs where there's like, you don't even have anything but this thin little mattress to lay on, because I just was so sick. I wanted them to do something for me. And
but they wouldn't.
Fun fact about opiates, you feel like you're going to die, but the only two you can actually die from are alcohol and benzos, like Xanax. You can go into like seizures and die. And so I felt like I was going to die, but I wasn't. So I only did 30 days. Charges were dropped. Again, another kind of God shot where I was like, wait, what? I'm going home. It was right before Christmas. And dude, I just got out and I went left instead of right. Like, I finally did what they told me to do over all these years. They said, you got to change one thing. And I was always like, awesome. That's not very much. And they said, it's everything. So I changed everything, dude. And so I got back in the fitness industry, and I started working at this place called Total Health and Fitness, doing like in-person nutrition coaching. And I'd had some certifications in being a nutritionist. And so I started grinding there, and I worked there for from 2013 until I started Key in 2017. And during that time, within the first year, moved up to the top guy there. And, but you get to this place where you're like, okay, so there's kind of a cap of how many people I could see and the cut they were taking from me. And, and so I was already thinking I'm going to leave. And then the guy who owned that company got addicted to drugs. Well, he was off and on, but he was a closet drug addict, but I could see it.
Yeah.
And he started going downhill. We weren't getting paid. And I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So I left. I started Key Nutrition like a week and a half later, and I took all my clients. And that's because he had, I and he ended up not paying me for 2 different pay periods. And so, I mean, technically, if he was probably sane, he probably could have came after me because they were their clients, but it didn't. It worked out. It was beautiful. I forfeited, 10 grand, and I was like, you keep it. I'm taking my clients.
Clients. Well, a little bit more about that. I mean, you get out of jail or prison, and I mean, you had to. There's no way that you were jacked at that point, were you? I mean, you had just been like at the worst place, kind of in your whole life, and then you just spent 30 days in prison. Were you coming out pretty physically fit? Was it easy for you to like just transition into?
No,
I'm like, no, to like get yourself in shape before you went to a personal training place and had them hire you?
It's interesting. No one's ever really asked me that. So I was about 20 pounds underweight when I got sober. When I went to jail. But jail food is shit, and I was so sick the first couple of weeks that I wasn't like by the end, I was doing some push-ups, and but I was still feeling it quite a bit. Like I was struggling to sleep, and I ended up gaining 40 pounds in 40 days. My first 40 days sober. Wow. 20 of it was probably good, and 20 was not. So I actually got a little chubby.
Oh yeah.
And so the guy hired me this place, and he was like, hey, but I'm going to run you through a program, like, cause you got to get in better shape. And I was like, I still have pictures of that. And so I did, and I got in really good shape.
So they hired you, I guess, just based off of like the certifications that you had before.
I had actually worked there in 2008 for about 4 or 5 months and did really well. And then one day I left, and I was like, I want to go get high. I was sober at the time. And so I did, and I ended up sending them an email and said, hey, I know this is blindsiding you, but this is my letter of resignation. I've had a family emergency. I can't really talk about it, because I knew, I was like, you're going to get sober again, like probably. And I don't know if you're going to stay sober, but you can't keep burning bridges. And so I was like, instead of trying to go in there high and then they fire me, that happened at different gyms. I had made the very, very calculated decision that I was just going to resign. And I was
thinking about your future a little bit. Yeah.
So when I got sober, I was waiting tables, and I ran into this guy, and he was like, what are you doing waiting tables? And I was like, well, here's the deal, man. I'm finally sober. I got out of jail. And he's like, well, I'm looking to hire a new guy, and I would love to chat. Like, you were super talented. Now, knowing he gave me a chance because he was battling addiction behind the scenes himself.
So he understood it. Yeah.
And so, I'm grateful for that, man. He actually passed away, unfortunately. And the guy who gave me that heroin, also dead. Oh. And, that's the thing is, heroin, you don't meet many long-term successful heroin addicts that they're like, oh, yeah, I got a 7-figure business, great family. It just takes everything.
It does.
And so and they say it's jails, institutions, and death. Like, that's kind of the 3 places that an addict like that ends up. And so,
but that's amazing that he gave you that shot. And then, so I guess at that point you knew, was this something you were clinging to in order to like kind of stay sober? You said, hey, if I could just commit all of my time and effort into growing a business that's going to help me. Cause I think you're at the fitness place for how long, you said?
That place?
Yeah.
4 years exactly.
Oh, you're there for 4 years.
From 2013 to 2017.
Okay. Gotcha.
That place, yeah. And then I left and started Key. And, I remember thinking like, I had no clue what I was doing, and I was scared. And I remember just thinking, you know what, man, dude, I had a good friend called me up, and he said, bro, if you can support that big of a drug habit with no job, think about if you put half the effort into it. And so I did. And I think it's important to pull off past experiences to really propel us forward during the hard times in business. And, I immediately, dude, I was so committed. I remember we were seeing clients in person for this coaching place. And I had I lived in Eagle Mountain. I was renting a room in some guy's basement, and I didn't have shit for gas, money for gas. And so I would drive in there from Eagle Mountain to Draper was like 30 minutes. And I would have like a 9 a.m. I'd have a 12. I'd have like a 4. And I'd have I would just take them whenever I could, these clients. Mm-hmm. And I got the list from the guy, and I was like, what are past clients? Like, give me a list of past clients. Mm-hmm. Can I call them, offer them a deal and say, I'm new here? And he was like, we never had anyone want to do that. And I'm like, give me the list. Like, I'm cold calling every one of these. Hey, my name is Brad. I'm at THF, and I'm a new coach here. I just wanted to offer you 10% if you ever wanted to come back. And most of them said no. And then occasionally I started getting these yeses. And
You just got better at kind of like selling them on the idea, or selling them the idea of them getting back into fitness, or was it just a numbers game?
I think it was just a numbers game, dude, because I had no clue what I was doing. Like nobody was like, hey, this is how you're going to talk to them when you call. I was just so motivated. I knew for me to stay sober that I had to build a life worth living. And I knew for me to not repeat the same pattern of do good for 4 or 6 months and then go completely off the reservation for 4 or 6 months. Like I knew that I had to have something worth losing. Right. And so I just grasped that early, and I was like hungry. And so when I started Key, it was kind of the same thing, dude. And, you know, and I had no clue what I was doing. I finally hired a business mentor in 2019. I wish I would have done that in 2017, just for the record. Like I wish that would have been one of the first things. Looking back, I'm not a big proponent of going into credit card debt ever, but I would have, if I could do it all over, I probably would have gone into debt on a credit card to hire a coach at first, because the first 2 years were okay, but they were, you know, we were making decent money, but I'm taking home jack shit. I'm still seeing a ton of people. I'm overpaying everybody. Like I'm like, okay, the business is doing good, but I'm not like, and so
you were paying yourself first. You weren't, systems weren't in place.
No, I was giving way too big of a percentage because I wanted to be like the cool boss. I'm like, yeah, but you can't make like you can't give these guys 65% of a client that you're spending money to get. And like, I never really looked at the numbers because again, I had no formal training in business, but what I did have was a shit ton of grit and work ethic. I think those are true prerequisites to having business success, but you also have to couple it with some smarts. And like, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to look at my numbers. I just knew like, we have a ton of people coming in and out of this place every day, but I'm really not making much money. Like,
and if you don't have the smarts, then you just got to find somebody that does, like something good for the business. Right.
So I hired this guy, and it was a huge investment that I didn't have, and I made it work. And thank God for that. By the end of that year, we hit our first 7 figures. I was taking home way more money, and was even coaching a little less. And like, it was, there were so many things broken in the business that I often wonder, had I not made that investment, if we'd even be around. You know, you can work ethic and grit can only get you so far if you're starting to burn the candle at both ends. And I had no clue how to like really analyze. And there was moves I had to make, but I was scared to make them. And so all of a sudden you're paying somebody good money and it's holding you accountable to make these moves. And I was like, all right. So I, rearranged a lot, and it's been quite the journey since then, man. We're going on, 7 years now. And, we've helped over 4,000 people transform their lives, and it's had ebbs and flows and great years. And then, even in 2023 was, I had my top 3 coaches leave. They took all their clients. There was legal shit involved. It was ugly.
Wow.
On a separate business I'm a part of, I got sued by a guy that I thought we parted on good ways. 2023 was a big year of lessons for me, and it kicked my ass. Now we're coming out of that, and that was the hardest year, even harder than even the beginning years, because there was betrayal. And the problem with how I was employing them was 1099s. There was a lot of legality stuff that even once I got a lawyer involved, and problem is after they're done with their 3 months, it's a month. Now it's a longer minimum agreement, and there's a lot of other things we put in place. So again, like, that system had worked until 3 coaches decided to say, hey, screw you, I'm leaving. And I respect people who want to go out on their own for entrepreneurship. That's the thing. Like, there was this part of me that was like, all right, but the 2 guys banded together to go start this business. And it's hard to not get for guys that have been with you for 6 years or 5 years, and you built this business, and then they just leave. And it's like, there's this part of me that's like, well, I did this. It was just how it all happened at once. And I share all that it was the biggest year of growth I've ever had. And I think that I've always said, I hear guys like Gary Vee talking about fall in love with your losses, right? And conceptually, it sounded great.
Yeah.
Until I got served a shit sandwich, like right off the bat in 2023. And I was like, whoa. And then we had some other things happen, and a bunch of, marketing agency that was a horrible waste of money and it didn't work out, and a ton of ads that bombed. And it was just like, I was like, when am I going to catch a break? Holy shit.
Yeah.
But I learned so much from that year and I made it through that year with my head on my shoulders. Like, I didn't lose my shit. I rearranged some of the money I was taking home. And I'm so grateful. And I truly believe, like, if you can you're going to get served a bunch of L's. And I was on a pretty good winning streak for a while. I was making more money for a couple of years than I ever thought I would. Mm-hmm. And then shit shifted a little. And it shifted in the economy. But as you know, like the minute I started to say that out loud, I was like, bullshit. Don't use that. Sure. Is it maybe playing into some of it? Yeah. But you're acting like it's 90%, Brad, and it's probably 10%.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're good at what you do, dude, you can sell in any economy, as you know. Like people will, maybe people won't have as much disposable income to spend, money on coaches, but they do. That's the thing. Like that story I was telling myself was going to be the death of me last year. And so I finally had a friend say, dude, stop that bullshit. Now you're just pinning that's the reason why business has been so tough. And he was like, bro, I just really encourage you to look at that. And I was so grateful for that because I was like, nope. So anytime someone's like, yeah, man, it's just a tough economy right now. And I'm like, I don't even want to hear it. I call it awareness, acceptance, action. The AAA battery is first you have to have awareness. And secondly, just accept like life on life's term. It doesn't mean I have to be okay with it. But I resisted so much of last year because I felt betrayed and I felt hurt. And the minute I just accepted, I'm like, okay, they're gone. Now I get a chance to hire some new awesome coaches. There were some things where I didn't super love, like about, they got a little entitled and part of that falls on me. And
there is new blood that comes in and it's like new life into a business.
Yes.
Bring new people in, new ideas, new life.
100%.
And it might be able to, depending on how it's gone so far this year, but it might take you to the next level that you live in.
Dude, it's already started. Yeah, exactly. It's already starting this year. And I resisted it. I just think so much we just accept it. And, a small example of acceptance in real life is, and you have to follow that up with action. But if I'm not in acceptance, it's because I find some person, place, or thing like unacceptable to Brad. But until I can accept that person, place, thing of being exactly the way it is now, it is. If that's how it is right now, then I can't find any peace. So if I can't find peace, I can't find this serenity inside. And so I was resisting it. I finally just got to this place of acceptance. But my girlfriend was mad at me the other day. I think she had a right to be mad at me.
Yeah.
And so in the past, I've really resisted this and I've made it worse because I'm like, no, let me over-explain. I'm just like, dude, she's just so mad at you. And I remember I was like, I'm just going to accept it. We'll get over this. Instead of just keep trying to fight and prove my point, how I'm right and she's wrong, I just accepted it.
That's a losing battle.
Yeah. That's a perfect example of acceptance in real life where I just was like, all right, cool, babe. Hey, I love you. Take the night. Give me a bus tomorrow. And guess what? It blew over. And she said, I really appreciated you not keep trying to change my mind on this. You just allowed me the space to be mad.
Yeah.
And so,
that's the hardest thing sometimes when you have the title of entrepreneur or salesman. My wife, sometimes she thinks I'm selling her an idea. And I'm like, no, I'm just telling you why I think it's a good idea. She's like, yeah, so you're selling me on the idea. I'm like, not really. If I wanted to sell you on the idea, I'd work a lot harder. And, I have a customer or something like that they just don't understand the full grasp of what we're trying to do. And they are kind of coming to the situation with a very limited point of view. And so I'm just trying to give them information and teach them and show them, hey, this is the bigger picture. This is why you should make a decision. But that comes across with me. So,
yes.
So a lot of times where I like the acceptance thing you're talking about is I just have to accept that their point of view right now is their reality.
Yes.
I just kind of have to hold their hand and hopefully just kind of guide them through. Usually it takes a lot of asking questions, tons of questions. So I really understand their point of view, really understand where they're coming from. That helps me usually gain acceptance.
Dude, get curious.
Yeah, I'm curious.
And it was funny. I remember, I took home a decent chunk last year. And part of it was I was just trying to be really smart for the business. And I was like, all right, you know what? I can take home a good chunk less and this can alleviate some of the stress. And I was like, just temporary. But it was like this ego death because, I worked so hard for years as an addict, homeless. When I got sober, I had a 400 credit score and black garbage bag that contained all of my belongings. That was it. No car, no nothing, no family that wanted anything to do with me at that point. We're all great now, by the grace of God. But I'd scrapped and scrapped and scrapped. And I got to a place where all of a sudden I'm like, now I'm making, this is the money I was talking about. And guess what? I was spending it just as fast as I was getting it too. And now I'm I've really flipped where I'm I've got some other investments, but I'm all right, the reality is, and I couldn't accept that. I couldn't accept that, still making money, but not like I was for a couple of years. I remember I called Jimmy and he was like, bro, congratulations. You got the shit sandwich with all of us, dude. Think about, I ate massive shit. Dude, I was making a ton of money. The real estate market crashed. Bro, you don't think I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in Nikola stock? Like, I was like, bro, you're eating a shit sandwich. He was like, congratulations. Like, every entrepreneur you look up to, all of our buddies have had this moment. And he was like, just accept it. And I was like, you're right. He was like, you will come back. And when you come back, you're going to be a little smarter with your money. You're going to be a little smarter in this. And I have been already. This year's been much better. And I realized, key nutrition is never going to be a sellable asset because I'm the bottleneck still. Even though I don't see as many clients, like, it's probably not. I mean, we could, but I was like, how can I turn this into a cash cow, cash flowing asset to then take that money and then diversify? And so I invested in this software that does fitness nutrition stuff, and we kind of lightly went to market so far, but I've been trying to diversify my money into some real estate and things that will ultimately build me some wealth. Because as a salesman, you can crush it, make $800,000 a year, but if you spend all of it,
like so back on, it's exactly, but it's just like eventually it's something that long term, the entire business and organization is based off of you and what you can do. And until you can learn to like kind of remove yourself a little bit or almost all of it, then it's not really. I feel like there's a lot of like controversy around this. Like, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur, being self-employed, and being a business owner. And that's the hardest thing that people think is like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a business owner. It's like, yeah, but if you take 2 months off, what happens to your business?
Yep.
Right.
And you know what? I had this kind of like moment where I realized, I'm like, are you just a business owner, or are you a real entrepreneur that can like, can you make your money work for you? Mm-hmm. Can you? And I was like, no, like, I feel like it's in my DNA that I'm an entrepreneur, but it's time to show that, because there's a lot of people who own businesses that are not entrepreneurs. They just happen to own a business.
Yeah.
That's it.
And the business is literally themselves pretty much. They're self-employed. It's kind of like to call it
100. And there's a difference. And I had to ask myself, and I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know. And over the last even just 6 months, I've been like, all right, yeah, I am who I thought I was. But I didn't know if I was. Like, I had to question this.
Yeah.
Because it came to me, was like, maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm full of shit. Granted, I don't have an entrepreneur in my bio, but, and I was sharing with you just off it, there's some really cool things I'm doing with my business, because I have this high ticket, like, kind of like a We Are the Day, but it's 4 months. It's a bigger investment, and we take people through like a deep dive, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It's like everything I've learned in my recovery and life and fitness, and we have therapists on staff, and we do some really cool stuff. But I run that 3 times a year, and it's called the Next Level Experience.
Awesome.
So I'll just share it on this podcast. It's not like it's a big secret, but I'm rebranding my whole company to Next Level Coaching. So it's going to be called Next Level Nutrition. The Next Level Experience will be my top end, and then I have a low ticket community, kind of like the Tribe with Jimmy, and it's been called the Collective. So I've had like 3 things I'm marketing where I'm like, I'm putting it all. It's all next level. That's going to be, and I wouldn't have gotten. Now I'm get to tell this. We're going to launch that here in a couple of weeks. Maybe, by the time this podcast comes out, maybe it'll be out there. And it's a big deal to me because I was so tied to this Key Nutrition name. And I'm realizing now, all of those guys leaving, all that shit happening in 2023 was the greatest gift I found. Because through that, now I get to tell this whole new story and narrative about what the hell it is I do and why I'm so passionate about taking people to the next level. And it all just like came to me. And I've ran this course for 4 years and never thought like, maybe I should call the whole company one name.
Yeah.
And this came to me, dude, after, it came to me like through all that struggle. And now I'm like doing this whole rebrand and a whole new narrative and a whole new story. And even just flipping that name, I am so excited about business again.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have got that if I didn't eat shit in 2023. So just my message in the entrepreneur out there, like if it's been tough, if you're going through the thick of it now, or if it was tough, for the last little bit, like good, because there's so much beauty on the other side of that. And I didn't know. And the last 3 months, dude, I've woken up with a new zest for business. And last year, I'd never thought of quitting, but I was like, what the hell am I doing? Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, one thing after another. And I've never been in a litigation. Like, what is happening? And that one sentence from Jimmy was like, congratulations, you're eating a shit sandwich. We all do.
Congrats.
And I was like, good.
Yeah.
You're right. He was like, dude, this will make you 1,000,000 times better. And so, just, look for the, you always got to, you got to have faith in your abilities. But look, there's some beauty at the end of the tunnel for you.
Well, I know that you're a pretty, religious guy as well, and that you found that. And I feel like that, with the whole religion and God thing, right? God gives us trials so we can overcome them and be strong on the other side. And I just love kind of the parallels between what you just said there, like all the struggles and hardships that you had, and you're coming out on the other side like so much stronger, so much better because of it, so much clarity.
Yeah.
And I think that excitement too is the most intriguing part about it, is because you're just, you're reinvigorated with new creativity. Because when you're in a business that's stable for a good amount of time, you lose almost the creativeness of it.
100%.
When you have something that's a functioning machine, it's like, cool, well, you don't want to change it too much because then you risk the machine getting derailed. But if you can have that, if the machine gets derailed or you gain a different perspective through a different way, and that allows you to start those creative juices going again, then yeah, there's nothing better.
Dude, amen. Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely, spirituality is a huge part of my life. Definitely not religious, but definitely spiritual.
Spirituality is what I meant,
yeah. Oh, you're all good. I figured. Yeah, dude. And so, and I took God with me all last year, and I would talk to him, and it's not the way I was raised to pray, but I'd be like, dude, you got some more jokes, huh? All right. Like, bro,
coming, let's go.
Bro, help me to learn through this. That's all I got. Like, so anyways, man, I appreciate you having me on.
No, that was fantastic. I'm really excited for the new projects that you have coming up.
Thank you, bro.
And we just look forward. Obviously on Instagram, we find you as the Sober Bodybuilder.
Sober Bodybuilder, by far where I'm the most active. You can give me a follow on there. That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay. So, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, brother.